and welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians on the bluegrass situation. It's me, Cindy Howes, and I host this podcast. Today, we are into our reissue series because I am on maternity leave. That's right. I don't know. I'm recording this in the past. It's April when I'm recording this, so I do not know if the baby is actually here or not, but here we are in our reissue series, and today we will be revisiting the John Hiatt episode originally posted in 2021. Before we get to that, let's get into our mailing list. Are you on our mailing list? It is the best way to stay in touch with Basic Folk. You can sign up for the once a month email at the link in the show notes, or you can go to basicfolk.com. We're also on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Basic Folk Pod. We're also a listener-supported podcast. You can make a financial contribution, as in like $5 a month, and help us finance this podcast and get yourself a Basic Folk beanie. I know we are not in beanie season, but beanie season always comes back around. You can make a contribution at basicfolk.com/donate, or you can grab the link in the show notes. In putting these reissue episodes together, I've listened back to these interviews, and I've got to say, people ask me sometimes, who has been your favorite person to interview? What has been like your favorite Basic Folk episode? And I think it's this one, John Hiatt. He was extraordinary to talk to. I went into the interview being like a fan, like somebody who has enjoyed John Hiatt's music over many, many years. Really, really love some of his songs. His song Cry Love is one of my top 5 songs of all time. But I left this interview really loving the guy and appreciating how honest and how deep he went with my very invasive questions, my very deep questions. He did not back off anything, and it led to some really interesting stuff, revealing some very emotional sides of him. So let's get into it. John Hiatt. So back in 2021, he released the album Leftover Feelings, which is still his latest album, by the way. It's a collaboration with the bluegrass great Jerry Douglas. Jerry was a producer, and his band backed Hiatt up on the record. John's digging into some serious past memories for these songs, which include a song about his older brother, Michael. Michael died by suicide when John was only 9, and it's only until now that he chose to write a song about the experience in the song Light of the Burning Sun. Jerry Douglas knew the material was serious and approached it very lovingly with John and the band. On the podcast, John expands on his grief and giving himself time and space to mourn. We also talk about the importance of radio in John's young life. He really seemed to enjoy talking about radio. He would listen to WLAC radio from Nashville when he was around 11 years old. There was a show on Sunday night that had a gospel show on. They'd go to a different black church every week and broadcast the service. John has said those gospel shows scared the shit out of me, and that opened the world to a completely different way to relate to music in terms of faith. John picked up the guitar at 11 years old to cope with the trauma involved in being an overweight child. This was especially hard because he was a bigger kid at a time when it was rare for a child to be heavier. He discusses how music, and surprisingly and interesting to hear him talk about how drugs and alcohol helped him overcome his weight issue, which then, of course, the drugs and alcohol led him to new problems in his adult years, requiring him to overcome that addiction and live a sober life. We actually did not really talk about his drug and alcohol use and his sobriety because there are so many other interviews out there, particularly when John was on Fresh Air with Terry Gross talking about his sobriety. So that's why I didn't touch the topic. John talks about his kids, which includes the musician Lily Hiatt. So Lily one time in an interview said, "I was crying over the fact that my career seemed stalled and I wasn't the flavor of the month. And Dad said, 'Lily, we will never be hip. we're just not those people. John has been a steadfast songwriter since the 70s who's written many well-loved songs like Have a Little Faith in Me, Cry, Love, and of course, Thing Called Love. The writing on his latest album spans several decades and confronts some of his most vulnerable feelings. To be able to talk to John Hiatt about this project was a sincere privilege. The record is awesome. If you haven't heard it, it did come out in 2021. Take a listen to it after you check out this interview with John Hiatt. We are going to check out a clip right now from that record. Here's The Music is Hot, and then we'll hear John Hiatt on Basic Folk.
Sheet stands on the line, white as the clouds gone by. Screen door kicking time as kids melt into the sky. You're making your moves, trying just to stay alive. And the music is hot.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me, John. This is so exciting to have you on the podcast, so thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
I've read that you're a pretty private person. You don't like talking about like certain details, so I've tried to like keep that in mind.
Oh, my life's an open book. Cindy.
Okay.
Ask me anything.
All right, great. And I am going to ask you about your feelings, so hope you're ready.
I'm sorry, I can't go there.
Okay.
It's too scary.
I know. I agree. But I'm hoping that we'll all learn a thing or two by the end of this. So on the new record, Leftover Feelings, the song The Music is Hot has a woman in the South listening to radio back in the day. And I want to hear about the influence and impact of listening to the radio for you, especially like growing up in a family of 7 children. It sounded like the radio was like a real solace for you. So how, and like, I'm wondering like how the connection to radio has changed over the course of your life as like a young kid who just loved the radio, and then as somebody whose music was then played on the radio.
What a terrific question. Radio was, that's how we heard music, folks from my era. And I grew up listening to just the local, I guess now you'd call it the Top 40 station, but in those days, Top 40 would be, you'd hear Otis Redding, and then you'd hear the Rolling Stones, and then you'd hear, the McCoys, Hang On Sloopy, and then maybe one of the more bluesy kind of rhythm and blues guys, and it was all mixed up. So it was kind of the golden era in a way. And for a kid from the Midwest, I mean, to hear Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell singing "Ain't No Mountain High Enough," or it just was, it's like they were speaking to my heart. Mm. So yeah, it had a tremendous impact on me, and I was trying to kind of mirror that, writing that song. The music is hot. Setting this woman, a single mother, raising kids, just trying to get by, and her inspiration being the great WSM radio station, which is the heavyweight country music station of the South.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how about as like you grew older, your relationship to radio, how might that have changed, like as you became someone who's trying to get your music on the radio?
Well, even when I started writing songs when I was 11, I was trying to emulate what I was hearing. I'll never forget, for example, I think I was 65, I would have been 13 or 13, hearing Like a Rolling Stone on the radio for the first time. And I was sitting in the car. My mother had parked the car and ran into a drugstore to pick up a prescription. And I was so profoundly affected by hearing the song that my thought was that when she came back out, she wouldn't recognize me.
Wow.
So that's how transformed I felt by that song. But anyway, and then later I'll jump up a few years when I was my first record on Epic Records, which came out in 1974. So what was I, 22? By that time we had album rock, and they would play whole albums on the local FM station. And there was one here in Nashville. I'd moved to Nashville when I was 18, and they were going to play my whole record. They had a program that featured local artists, and so I ran out and jumped into my Volkswagen van and turned the radio on and listened to it was the first time I'd ever heard myself on the radio.
Oh, that's exciting.
It was very exciting. It was profound.
One more question about the radio. I read that you used to listen to WLAC from Nashville when you were in Indianapolis. You were
yes.
around 11, and there was a show on Sunday night where they would basically broadcast a gospel service from a different Black church every week. And you had this amazing quote about it. You said, those gospel shows used to scare the shit out of me.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, I was singing in our choir at church, in the boys' choir, but we were singing a Catholic Mass. It was still in Latin. So these people are carrying on and telling you what it was all about. And we were singing Kyrie eleison, Gloria in excelsis Deo, which I didn't even understand. Now, I was moved by it profoundly. I loved singing in the choir.
How did that music impact, like that you would hear on the radio from those gospel services? How did that impact or open up your relationship to religion or to faith?
Well, I think it was kind of later when I found that. Although I'm sure, I had faith in the music, and that's God enough, I think. So yeah, I had faith in this power greater than myself, music, and its ability to move people. And I remember listening to the show that I listened to on Sunday night was Hossman Allen, who was actually a white guy, and he was always the various churches that would have him for the first time, they were always surprised to find out that he was a white guy because he sounded like a black guy. And I got to meet him actually later in my life. Wonderful man. But yeah, he had a huge influence on me.
So you are from Indianapolis and grew up kind of being obsessed with racing and the Indy 500. It sounds like the drivers were as much as like rock stars as actual rock stars, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And the first track on the new album, Long Black Electric Cadillac, dedicated to an electric car. So I want to know, like Neil Young loves those like real big honkers that are gas guzzlers. So he's been known to talk about trying to make those cars more green. But
he's made one. He made one. He took a Lincoln and electrified it. He calls it the Link Volt.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
So it is doable, America. We can make a long black electric Cadillac.
Yeah. That song is great. And how has your love for cars evolved over the years, and like where's your malleability landed when it comes to like new environmentally friendly cars?
Well, assuming the math works, in other words, the power it takes to charge these things, if we can do that in a green way, I'm all for it. I love the idea of electric cars, and I'm hoping that it's something that's going to work out for the world. I think it's, as I say, I don't know the particulars of what it takes to charge these things, what kind of power it takes to do that, where do you get that power from, so on and so forth. So there's things I'm not that sophisticated, but I have ridden in one, and they're amazing. It's seamless acceleration. There's no gear shifting. It just goes. And you have the same amount of torque at 90 miles an hour as you did at 10. It's just incredible.
Wow.
I'm all for it. Long black electric Cadillac. I'll be at the dealership tomorrow as soon as they make it.
Also like a great opening for a John Hiatt and Jerry Douglas collaboration where it just starts off with his insane dobro playing. Like Jerry Douglas's dobro playing to me sounds like a unicorn riding on a rainbow.
That's great. I'm going to tell him that.
You should.
That's perfect. Yeah, he takes its places. That's for sure.
How did it feel to like I know you love working with like musicians who use fretless instruments like Jerry and Rodney Crowell, but how did it feel? Like, how does it feel to like experience that kind of like out of this world sound alongside your songs?
Levitating. Yeah. It was like walking on clouds, you know. We had so much fun making the record. We did it in 4 days. And, yeah, just, you know, the arrangements were off the floor. It was all live. There were just a couple of overdubs after the fact. I remember, I know Christian Stedelmeyer and Daniel, the bass player, did a little string quartet on the song Buddy Boy. That was an overdub, but the performances were all of a piece and recorded live in the RCA Studio B.
You actually have like a knack for banging out albums in a very short amount of time. Like you said, this record recorded in 4 days. And it's interesting to think about your time at Tree Music Publishing Company in Nashville when you were 18 years old writing songs, which you wrote and recorded 250 of them. And how did that like early experience of recording all those songs so quickly affect the way you work in a studio?
I think it was a wonderful experience. You know, they had a little tiny, it was a 4-track studio. And a young guy named Eddie, I can't think of his last name, ran it, engineered it. And I'd be in there as much time as I could get. I'd be in there. And it was basically just a vocal booth and then a little tiny room where you could set up a little 2-piece drum kit, maybe. But I'd be stuck in that vocal booth just making guitar vocal demos as quick as I could write them. And I think it gave me the opportunity to be at ease, you know, in a recording setting, and also to get used to hearing myself sing, because it's an awful thing to hear yourself sing when you first do it. Rodney Crowell came by the studio the other day when we were doing some filming, and he walked up to me and he said, "Have you gotten over hating your own singing voice yet?" And I said, "Well, you know, I've made my peace with it. Let's put it that way."
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was funny, because it is odd, you know, to hear yourself.
I wanted to ask you about the song "Light of the Burning Sun," which is about your brother Michael's death. You said, which he died by suicide when you were 9 years old, and you said the thing about a traumatic event in one's life is that it sort of packs its bags and moves into your psyche, and so it can take some time to get over that and to make peace with that. Can you talk about giving yourself the time to make peace there, and what it was like to face the grief of Michael, like before you wrote that song and afterwards?
Well, it's he took his own life when I was 11, and there were 7 of us. He was the oldest, and my mother's firstborn. She adored him, of course. He worked for my father, unhappily, as it turned out. But it's as you spend your life learning how to live. So I've spent my life learning how to live with a tragedy like that happened. That happened, in my family. And you talk about the bags they sort of get packed and come along with you, and it's kind of what you have to do is sort of start unpacking the bags as you go along, and as you're ready and willing, and however much help you can get or need, and take a look at the clothes that are in there, and what fits, what's you you can wear it, and what's grief is, it has its own schedule. So it can take forever, and it's okay. But it was great to finally write a song about it, and it's a very factual, just an accounting of what took place, and it kind of came out all in a piece, as I recall. I wrote it, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and so I was there was a great deal of relief to just getting it down. And also, I like the idea that that I can connect now, possibly because of the song, with other people who've had this experience. And so, you know, it's another way of connecting with humanity. So you got to deal with the grief and the hard stuff as well as the joy and the happiness.
Definitely. And I think that that's like one great service that artists and songwriters give to us, is that you are able to put your feelings out there in a way that makes us feel less alone. So I'm sure it's much appreciated.
I think most of us feel that that's the special link that we are so grateful to, because I'm like a lot of typical singer-songwriter. Connecting with people is not my long suit in terms of, I'm not particularly outgoing or anything. I'm kind of a shy guy, so it's kind of like, who was the character that imagined doing all these great things back in the 50s? I can't remember his name, but a lot of my world is imaginary, and to be able to, so this writing songs allows me to connect with the big we, W-E.
Yeah. Jerry approached that song very lovingly with you and his band, and you and Jerry have known each other in a professional capacity, and this is the first time you're working together. But I imagine that there were times like this where your relationship grew like exponentially. So what did his approach mean to you, especially on that song, and how do you think that experience deepened your friendship?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. We've known each other professionally, but we're just now actually becoming friends through working on this record. And I was so touched with the kindness, the way he handled the song, and urged me to record it. I didn't even want to record it. I was a little leery. I thought, Jerry, geez, this is so dark. And he said, no, people need to hear this. He was encouraging. So it was a very loving, kind thing for a friend to do. That's what it felt like to me.
And when you are writing your lyrics, I have heard that you write the melody first and the lyrics kind of like reveal themselves to you while you're messing around with the music. Like you said, you've just got to jump inside and take the ride. So given that, what has that taught you about processing your feelings and experiences through songwriting?
Well, that's the well. You go to when I've got a little chord pattern and a melody maybe that I'm goofing around with, and a rhythm gag. It's a lot about the rhythm too, that kind of dictates. And then it's like you might even in singing nonsense. Oftentimes I'll sing a line that makes sense, and I'll go, oh, that's what I'm going to write. That's what this song's about, So that can happen, but yeah, it's. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Just thinking about how the songs, the lyric allows me to connect with. It's not just my feelings. It can be something I've read or a story that was told that I'm retelling. Stories is what we have as human beings. 'Twas always thus. I mean, we've told stories since the beginning of time. So it's just it's the same story probably. We just retell it.
Yeah.
The fish gets bigger or smaller, but
One of my favorite songs of all time is Cry Love. In the lyrics, it sounds like, so I was listening to it today, and after like reading all of your history, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you are taking responsibility for your part in something and pointing out your shortcomings. Does that sound right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the character is a woman who's been hurt, and I've hurt people in my life for sure. Didn't want to.
Right. So facing that kind of realization, I think, takes a lot of humbleness and humility and just facing shame, like what was the process like of understanding your faults in situations, and what was it like to express that so publicly in songs?
Well, for me, the only way I've ever been able to make peace with all that stuff is by writing a song about it. It's like my version of journaling, I guess, if you will. I know that helps a lot of people just to write stuff down, to put pen to paper, or in my case, fingers to my iPad nowadays because I can't read my own writing. But yeah, it's how I kind of it's how I figure out the emotional landscape of a given period in my life, or events, or what other people I know are going through, or yeah.
I just love that. I mean, I just love it when people are. I'm reading Brandi Carlile's book right now, which I'd recommend, and I'm reading the beginning of it. And I'm like, she sounds really difficult, really tough, but I'm also thinking that like I really like that in songs when people are like, "Hey, I messed up and I was a jerk, and I admit it." And as the book is going on, I'm like liking her even more and more and more. But I love it when somebody can do that in like a 3-minute song.
I've been married to my wife for 35 years as of June 6th this weekend.
Oh, congrats!
And if you can't cop to your stuff, a marriage isn't going to last very long. So I've learned. I've got a good teacher.
Okay, so here is where we learned that we lived parallel lives for a little while. So you were an overweight child, as was I.
Yes.
An overweight Catholic child, as was I.
Uh-oh.
Yep. So I really relate to that experience. And you learned to play guitar when you were 11 because you were you said you call yourself a fat kid.
I did, which is not, I know it's not very sensitive.
It's like...
That's what I felt like.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's sort of like trying to make a joke out of it so you don't really have to talk about it. But
that's exactly it. Yeah.
You wanted to have friends, you wanted to be loved, and that was the thing that you reached for. So I was actually talking to my friend and trainer who says they were saying that children who experience the trauma of being overweight tend to be healthier adults, which I also totally relate to. But I'm wondering, like, how does that experience of like being an overweight child follow you around, and how does that resonate with you? Like, how does health resonate with you these days?
That's a lot. I was overweight. I weighed, by the time I was 15, I weighed 320 pounds. And food was just the way I consoled myself and stopped all the crazy stuff that was happening around me from happening. I literally was trying to get big enough so that nobody could come in and hurt me anymore. So that was what was going on. And thank goodness I found music when I was 11. Also, thank goodness I found alcohol when I was 11. And the combination really, really saved my life. I mean, I'm grateful for both of them. I'm happy that I don't have to drink and take drugs anymore. But that period it was important because it fueled. It was a way for me to get out of that situation, and I could drink and feel better about myself. So and the music, of course, was very soothing. Later, of course, alcohol turned on me. I got sober when I was 32, so it took a minute, but yeah, I think you build. I think it's formerly overweight people. I think it's builds empathy in a person. I understand. And when I was overweight, we're talking the early 60s, it was a little more unusual to be overweight in America back then. It's not quite as unusual today.
Growing up in the 80s, it was hard to find like clothing and stuff that.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I went to Catholic school, and we didn't have the boys didn't have uniforms, but they all dressed the same, and of course I couldn't buy the same clothes that they were buying, and people couldn't for other reasons. They couldn't afford them, and so on and so forth. But I was at the big and tall shop and all that stuff, exactly where I didn't want to be,
right. Right.
But there I was. So, but you learn. I think you learn. It's a life lesson. And as far as I've had body image issues my whole life. It's just, but in the last couple of years, I've gotten pretty easy going about it all. And I've been maintained my weight essentially for the last 25 years. So.
It's no small feat.
No, and you have to work at it every day. I have to have I'm good. I'm not good when I'm bored or left to my own devices. I have to have a kind of things that happen to every day in a little bit of an order, so that I can I feel comfortable that way.
Your daughter Lily Hiatt is a really successful and very cool musician. And you were a single dad with Lily for a short amount of time. But I was wondering if you could talk more about your connection with her, keeping that in mind when she was growing up.
Well, she lost her birth mother to suicide in 1985. She had just turned 1 year old. And I subsequently moved, she and I, to Nashville, and I was within the first year of being here. I met my wife. I was the last person on earth looking for anything like a relationship, much less getting married again. But it was meant to be. So, and my wife had an 8-year-old boy, my stepson Rob, and Lily was 2 at that time, and we were married in 1986, and it was as if, we were kind of guided, almost like somebody was saying, you guys apart, I don't know if you're gonna be able to pull this off, raising your kids apart, but I think if we put you together, you got a crack at it. So that's what happened. And 2 years later, we had Georgia Ray, and these kids are amazing. They're the finest people I know, and they love each other. That doesn't always happen in a blended family, I'm told. So we were delighted at that, and every time we see them, they're just delightful people. We're very, very proud of them.
Yeah, I read this really great interview that you and Lily did together, and she said, "I was crying over the fact my career seems stalled and I wasn't the flavor of the month. And my dad said, 'Lily, we will never be hip. We're just not those people.'"
Yeah.
What did you mean?
Yeah,
by
we're
that?
not. We're not, and it's just fine. Yeah.
When did you reckon with that, and how did it feel to draw that conclusion?
Oh gosh, I guess it took time. I'm hopeful that I can say sometime in the last 20 years the penny dropped, and I just kind of it's okay. I get what I do, and I'm very happy to do it, and I feel grateful to be able to do it, and that's what it's about, at the end of the day. So, yeah.
We were talking about empathy a little bit earlier, and I really wanted to ask you this question about being a man in the music industry who's made some very masculine sounding music over the years, but you've also made some more sensitive sounding music. And if one zooms into your songs, there's a softness there, even in the rough songs. And you've written from the perspective of women and have had women transform your songs to a female point of view, like Bonnie Raitt, most notably, Thing Called Love. So how has this experience of expressing sensitivity impacted your maleness and your ability to empathize with non-males?
Well, I was the last boy at home with 3 sisters and my mother. And at the time I hated it. But now, and for many years, I'm forever grateful. I learned so much about the female perspective and my own feminine qualities, if you will. I think we have both, And so yeah, I had to. What I didn't have was my father died when I was 13, so I really had no guide for how to become a man. So that took me a long time because I didn't have. I refer to this often. Simple things like I used to watch the little boys at the sporting events, and they'd be in the restrooms in between, the action with their dad, and the dad would be showing them how to use a urinal, And I would look at that and go, nobody ever taught me that. Just basic, functional maleness. I didn't have a guide. And my father died when I was 13, which is when boys need a father the most. You've hit puberty, you don't have a clue, raging hormones, you're crazy as a bed bug, and you just need somebody to help you, navigate. And Pop wasn't there. But I had sisters, and they loved me. And, the summer I spent in my bedroom listening to Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, and didn't come out. They put up with that, and they humored me, and they were warm at the times I did come out for a meal or whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't act like, what are you, crazy? So just things like that. So I developed a great deal of respect for female points of view, and empathy, and also just the give and take of male-female relationships. But as I say, it took me a long time to grow up in terms of becoming a man, and I'm not even sure I know what that is, but I'm still growing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good.
Your music has ridden the scope of many genres over your career, with a few albums, notably Crossing Muddy Waters, and now with Leftover Feelings, a few albums being seeped in folk and bluegrass influence. How have you found that particular sound of bluegrass and folk helpful in expression of the song's meanings?
I love that setting. I love fiddles, and Christian Settlemeyer, who played on this record, is just so amazing. He can, of course, he's steeped in the bluegrass tradition, but he can play anything. Just unbelievable. And Daniel Kimbrough, the upright bass player, same thing. He can bow his double bass like a symphony guy, and yet he'll boom, boom, boom with the best of them on any bluegrass tune you want to call out. So, and Jerry, of course, just unbelievable, virtuoso. But they all have soul. They all know how to play songs. But yeah, I remember hearing Tut Taylor when I came here in 1970. He was kind of the king dobro player in Nashville at that time. I guess after Josh Graves, and I remember hearing him at the Old Time Pick and Parlor and just being amazed at the sound of that instrument and how it speaks and sings, and just wonderful.
The new album has no drums.
That is correct.
That is correct.
The drummer blew up.
I hear Jerry wanted the drummer.
Jerry wanted the drummer, and I said, why don't we do it without the drums? I don't know why. I just felt like, I'd made that record you mentioned, Crossing Muddy Waters, which was bluegrass-ish, had the similar kind of flavor, acoustic instruments, and no drums on that, although we mic'd Davey Farragher, the bass player's foot, he stomped. He stomped. So we had that, but I just felt like we could really get something and make the rhythm ourselves, you know. But these guys are so. I mean, I'm a rhythm guitar player, and I fancy myself, you know. I can, as they used to say back in the day, scrum a cushion.
What?
I can scrum a cushion.
Scrum a cushion.
Yeah, that's a good rhythm jag on a record, R&B record from the '60s. You know, if you started noodling, the producer would come on and go, just scrum a cushion.
Oh my God! All right, I'm going to use that in real life.
Yeah, scrum a cushion. Yeah, don't be all up in the Welsh corgi, up standing on the hind legs. just scrum a cushion.
So, how did it feel to establish the beat without the drums? Sounds
Just
like it was
wonderful.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, all of us are all stringed instrument players are frustrated drummers, probably anyway. You know, and I know I started out beating on pots and pans before I picked up the guitar. You know, drove my mother crazy. You know.
It's funny to think that you were a loner back in the 70s when you first got to Nashville. But since then, you've tended to thrive on collaborations with Jerry on this record, working with Rodney Crowell and Nick Lowe. How have you noticed these types of collaborations changing you, and how has it impacted your relationship to performing?
Well, every record is a new adventure, and getting together a group of players is, you know, the next big exciting moment to me anyway, a singer-songwriter. The thought of, what would this group of musicians make of these songs, you know, and so then to take that out and play it is sort of like, you know, the cherry on top of the whole deal. This is why we do it, you know, so we can go out and perform, play the songs, make the connection, you know.
You have to be like so confident in your songwriting abilities to like throw it at all sorts of different collaborators.
Well, I've been really lucky that you know, I've been able to play with some great players, and that's just I most of the time I'm scratching my head going, how did I land in this tall of cotton, you know? So
probably from scrumming the cushion.
Kind of scrumming the cushion, I guess.
The song Little Goodnight is the oldest song on the record about your youngest baby, who is now 33 years old.
33.
Georgia Ray.
She was one of those what they called colicky babies. And we nearly lost our minds. And but finally at about 3 months she started sleeping. It's like a switch went on or off, as the case may be.
So what was it like to revisit that song about parenting such a young baby?
It was wonderful. You know, I'd made a demo of it that many years ago, but I never put it on a record. And I sent it to Jerry as a group of songs to consider, and he said, we got to record that. So he said, every parent's been through that, for goodness sake.
Yeah, it sounds
with
like
at least one child.
It sounds like Jerry, like you gave him, how many songs did you give him to check out?
I think about 15, 14.
Were you surprised at the songs he selected?
Well, Light of the Burning Sun surprised me. Yeah.
And also, you recorded at RCA Studio B, which if people are unfamiliar, it's this ultra-historic space. Elvis Presley recorded hundreds of songs here. There are tours that go through this studio, but luckily you guys didn't have to deal with that because of the pandemic. Well, I guess not luckily because of the pandemic, but anyways.
But it was our good fortune.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
And you said it's just like this big old warm smile that wraps around you. You can just hear all that music coming out of the walls. So what was the role of Studio B in the album, and how did the space help shape the record?
Well, it has its own sound, you know, and if you hit it right, if you set the mics up right, it's like having a sixth musician, you know, playing along with you. And that's the way recording studios were built back in those days. They weren't meant to be acoustically neutral rooms that added no color. They were meant to add color. The idea was to, if you set the mics up right and dealt with the eccentricities of the room, acoustically speaking, that you'd wind up with something larger than the sum of the parts. It would come out a little bigger, a little better. And this was before all the digital stuff that you can do in a computer now, which is all amazing. But this is the old way, where you let the room give what it has to give.
Nice. Okay, you have had songs and references to dogs in your music. What has the companionship of a dog meant to you, and can you talk about your favorite dog?
Oh, I don't play favorites with dogs, much like I don't play favorites with my kids. I've loved them all, and they've all brought different, stuff to the table. So we've had dogs. I've had dogs. I had dogs when I was a kid. I grew up with a couple of Weimaraners, and then in my marriage to my wife, we lived on a farm for 25 years, so we'd have 4 or 5 dogs at a time. We've had Great Danes. We've had rescues of all stripe and color and look and shape and size. We've had Jack Russell Terriers. We've had pitties. We've had all kind of dogs. All dogs go to heaven. We currently have he's a cross, a West Highland Terrier and a Maltese. He's all of 11 pounds, and we named him Spanky. And he was a rescue from a breeding operation that went south. He spent his first 16 months in a cage. So he's been traumatized, and we told him, well, you fit right in to this family, so come on. And he's just the sweetest little dog. My wife and I look at each other and go, if you'd have told us at any time in our married lives that we'd wind up with a wee white dog, we'd have laughed.
Yeah.
But that's what we have, and he's a sweetheart.
Yeah. All right, John, can we do one more thing before we let you go?
Yes.
Okay, this is called the lightning round.
Yeah.
Here we go. What was the first song you learned on the guitar?
It's a song I wrote. As soon as I had 2 chords, I wrote a song. It's called Beth Ann.
Oh.
And it was about we were in 5th grade. She was in 6th. She had developed a little more than the other gal, so we were all paying attention to her. And it went, Beth Ann, ooh, she's a woman. That was my first song. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you take your coffee?
A little cream and a little monk fruit sweetener.
Who's your first celebrity crush?
Oh, wow. Gidget.
Who's the nicest musician you've ever met?
Well, Nick Lowe's a sweetie.
He is so nice. I met him one time. He was great.
Yeah.
Good choice. What was your first concert?
The Yardbirds.
What?
At a 100-seat club in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Wow.
And it was either Jeff Beck or Jimmy Page on guitar. I think it was Jeff Beck. And, over, under, sideways, down.
What was the last book you read, or what is the book you're reading right now?
I'm reading a book that's not in front of me, but it's a mystery by a Scottish writer, and it's just marvelous. And I wish my poor brain. It's great though.
Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Oh, Rolling Stones and Beatles. How can you choose?
Good point. Yeah. Would you rather be able to fly, or would you rather be invisible?
I'd love to fly. That'd be spectacular.
Okay, this is the last question.
Okay.
Where is the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
We were up on a mountain in Switzerland, did a show, and I can't remember the name of the place, but it was spectacular, the most beautiful views I'd ever seen. Yeah, so somewhere in the Swiss mountains in the summer. In the summer. Good. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time and answering all my questions about your feelings.
My pleasure. It was fascinating and wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate you.
Thanks. Yeah. All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by C.J. Nungesser. Dietrich Strauss composes our music. Basic Folk is a production of the Bluegrass Situation. You can find all of our episodes there. You can check us out on Folk Alley's mobile app or folkalley.com. Search for Basic Folk on the SiriusXM app. You can go to our website, basicfolk.com, or you can find us wherever you listen to your shows. If you enjoyed this episode, I suggest sharing it with a friend, like perhaps your very overly emotional family member who loves country music and feelings. That person would really enjoy this episode. All right. Thanks a lot for listening all the way to the end. You're the best. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.